Well, it is finally official. We have the report. Stanford, Cal, and SMU joining the ACC in what will only prolong the expansion/realignment saga, because the expectation now is that FSU and Clemson will be in the SEC, and that will happen next off-season. Both of them vehemently voted against this. Also, it came out last night that North Carolina voted against this, so that only leaves NC State as the ones to flip their vote and officially allow Stanford, Cal, and SMU into the conference. And we do have, these numbers, under the ACC's most recent proposal, Stanford and Cal would take reduced shares at around 30%, and SMU was expected to take zero TV share for 9 years. The schools would see an escalation in their shares through the grant of rights, and they'd receive non-TV ACC shares. So they will get some added perks of being in a Power 5 conference. But if SMU, they're getting zero TV money for 9 years, that is remarkable. ACC will add Stanford, Cal, SMU in 2024. So now, oh my goodness, is this not completely, I guess it's not really awkward, but there were only two, Washington State and Oregon State, and it seems like the Mountain West is calling. I'm guessing both Washington State and Oregon State will be in the Mountain West in 2024. That news should probably come out relatively soon. The last we heard on Oregon State and Washington State, they were choosing between the American and the Mountain West. But when you base it off of the negotiation, the TV contracts, it makes sense, in my opinion, with all the, locations for those two schools to join the Mountain West, because the Mountain West will be renegotiating their TV deal in 2026. While the Americans' TV deal is slightly better by about $3 million, they're not going back to the negotiating table until 2032. So I would expect the next big news we get, Oregon State, Washington State will be in the Mountain West, possibly in the coming days, depending, because they need schedules for 2024. That's the whole idea of this ACC thing, dragging on, and then we finally officially get the result after NC State. It's not surprising that NC State was the school that decided to flip, because when you look at NC State in the world of realignment and the four schools that voted not to add Cal, SMU, and Stanford, NC State is in the least demand out of North Carolina, FSU, and Clemson. NC State would be the least demand. So it makes sense that NC State would maybe cover themselves, although there is also the idea that NC State might be tied at the hip to North Carolina. Both the North Carolina schools, based off of legal reasons, have to be in the same conference. I don't know if North Carolina can get out of that, because I'm sure North Carolina is possibly looking at going to the SEC or the Big Ten, and the SEC and the Big Ten are going to be reciprocative to that, because North Carolina is, in terms of TV money, they are a plus school. And then what is FSU going to do? I saw someone in the comments say that Saudi Arabia should help FSU. Saudi Arabia is getting into North American pro sports, and it's very strange, because they've got remember when they offered Messi like a 1-year $500 million deal or something? They've just got so much money. Imagine FSU takes money from Saudi Arabia to pay their buyout, and they just say, screw it, we're joining the Big Ten. But guys, in all seriousness, the full breakdown on FSU and Clemson, where are they going to go? I think ESPN understands that FSU and Clemson are not going to let this stand. They're not going to live for making so much less money at around $40 million, when you have teams like Rutgers and Maryland that are going to be making $75, $80, $85 million. Vanderbilt's in that same area. Missouri's in that same area. FSU and Clemson, and ESPN's, they're smart enough to understand. So ESPN is saying, we own the rights to the ACC, and we own the rights to the SEC. So let's keep the ACC good. Let's influence this. Let's get Cal, SMU, and Stanford into the league. And by the way, when you look at those three teams, I think SMU has the most potential based off their NIL situation. But, Cal and Stanford, on the other hand, since the NIL thing started, especially Stanford, they've been kind of a letdown. They're having these teams join not because they're going to add to this conference in terms of football, although maybe SMU down the line might. The main reason that these teams are joining is because strength in numbers, right? If you lose Clemson, FSU, maybe even NC State and North Carolina, because originally those were the schools that voted against it, strength in numbers, you still have a big conference because you just added 3 teams. You're not going to find yourself in a Pac-12 situation where you're scrambling, you're down to 10 teams, you're down to 8 teams, you're down to 4 teams, and now the Pac-12 is completely done at just 2 teams, and it will fully dissolve when Washington State and Oregon State join what will likely be the Mountain West. So that is that update. SMU possibly not getting any TV money for 7 to 9 years. Cal and Stanford coming in at a significantly reduced rate. A lot of the ACC has got to like this, getting those schools in at such a low percentage. And then the expectation is, yes, Clemson and FSU will be gone, but ESPN will facilitate Clemson. Oh, this is what I forgot to say. ESPN, they're allowing this and they're coaxing this to happen because they already are probably going to give FSU and Clemson some type of sweetheart buyout out of the TV deal, under the assumption that those teams will be going to the SEC. So ESPN's not going to lose the media rights to Clemson and FSU. They're just going to be in the SEC, and then that's going to enable ESPN to push for a 9 or a 10 game conference schedule in the SEC. I'm guessing they'll go to 9 and then 10. But yes, the absolute culmination and crescendo of this entire thing is the 10-game conference schedule. The Big Ten's already talked about it, and I mean, ESPN, Fox, they're all licking their lips at the idea of getting 10 conference games for the SEC, and you get FSU, Clemson, Georgia, Alabama all facing each other every year. That is the dream for those networks. So guys, that's the big stuff. I'm sure the next news to drop will be Oregon State and Washington State doing something, but the other thing I was going to do, I was just going to react to college football, the games last night, but then this came out, so it's taken them about, 6 or 7 minutes of the video, but we're just going to quickly react to the games that went on last night. Florida, man, I don't know who... Florida is they just don't have a quarterback. So Utah easily beats them 24-11. Florida has a nice little 2-point conversion there at the end to make it a weird score. But Utah on their first offensive possession, what was it, a 75-yard touchdown or something? Utah easily covers the spread even without Cam Rising. And Florida's looking probably at a 5-7, 4-8 year. The SEC East stays a joke. And that's a solid win for Utah. They needed it. The Pac-12 needed it. And really not all that surprising. Although I will say, with Cam Rising out, there were people that thought Florida might hang in there. I said Utah would win this game. I said they would cover. And I end up being right. We'll take it to open the season. You've got Wake Forest beating Elon University. And you really would think that Elon Musk would invest more into his university in NIL. It's unfortunate there, but Wake Forest wins this game very easily. They were up 24-0 at half. I am not expecting much of anything from Wake Forest this year, but I guess we'll see. UCF, another 50-burger. 56-6. Kent State had some of the lowest returning talent in all of college football. That's why this spread was so high at 36, and UCF still covers it. Georgia State barely beats Rhode Island. Oh my God, that game was at Turner Field. That's just so sad, but Georgia State barely wins that one. Not a great sign for them. Next, we've got Western Michigan beating St. Francis of Pennsylvania 35-17. I guess you'll take it if you're Western Michigan. Of course, we don't expect them to do much. Although, remember with PJ Fleck, Western Michigan, NC State beats UConn. So yeah, just a boring game here. No one scored in the fourth quarter. 24-14. NC State, I think, was sitting -14. Brendan Armstrong making his debut for NC State. I guess he threw for 155 yards, ran for 96. They end up winning. UConn covers. It'll be interesting to see if UConn can make a bowl this year. They're returning a bunch of players, and, they had a kind of breakout year by their standards last year. Minnesota beats Nebraska in a very boring game, 13-10. I mean, I thought Nebraska would win this game outright. I had them plus the 7 because I thought Minnesota's offense was not good. I was right up until the way end. Of course, Nebraska blows it. That's a brutal loss if you're Nebraska and you're trying to build something with a new head coach. That's a game on the road at Minnesota. If you get that one, that takes your season from like 6-6 to possibly like 7-4 with a chance to go 8-4, in the last game of the season. Like, that's just such a swing game, man. You got to win that game. But Minnesota comes back. I am not high on Minnesota and their offense. I know some people like them as a fringe top 25 team. I'm not buying it. Missouri beats South Dakota 35-10. I mean, I don't even think Missouri covered the spread there. Tulsa beats Arkansas Pine Bluff 42-7. Not much to say about that. UAB handles North Carolina A&T, I think that is, 35-6. Arizona State barely beats Southern Utah. My goodness. How hot was that game? It had to have been like 104 degrees there in Arizona, but they win that game by 3. Not a good sign against an FCS school. But guys, those are just the opening Thursday games. Once again, the biggest news, SMU, Stanford, and Cal, they're all in to the ACC beginning in 2024. They're going to have to readjust everything. The schedules are going to change, and now we are down to 2 with Washington State and Oregon State in all likelihood going to the Mountain West. They will be dropping down from the Power 5 to the Group of 5. And I would imagine that would be announced sometime in the near future. But that is the big story today. So guys, that is going to do it for this video. Make sure you're following me on X. Link to that's always in the description.